Hello again, and welcome back to episode 2 as we continue our Dig Down Deep series exploring the book of Ruth. And we're in the final chapter looking at the epilogue in the story of redemption as it leads on to restoration. What a turnaround we find ourselves in from the beginning of the story. In chapter 1, we find ourselves in the funeral, and here we are at a wedding. Chapter 1 opens with famine, and chapter 4 closes with fullness. The story of Ruth is a reminder of the faithfulness of God, who is true to his promises. Let's have a look together through this final few verses to see what we can learn from God and the book of Ruth. Read with me in verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The hearts of both Ruth and Boaz must have been full to bursting. Both had been given a second chance and the opportunity for a rich and rewarding life together. Now, the Bible describes marriage as a real gift, which can open the door to intimacy, strength, care, and support. This is true for Boaz, who was getting on in years and hadn't yet married, as well as Ruth, who had lost her first husband of 10 years and whose first marriage had remained childless. The couple conceive and give birth to a son, and this is seen as further evidence of the blessing and redemption of God in their lives. However, it's important to pause at this moment just to note that today in the UK, at least 1 in 6 couples find it difficult to conceive. It's understandable that some might incorrectly look at the story of Ruth and conclude that somehow they have done something wrong resulting in infertility. This is not the point that the author is trying to make here. Infertility can be an emotional and challenging thing to experience. And if you or anyone else that you know is walking through this, I encourage you to reach out for support so you don't have to walk through it alone. The point that the author is making here is to remind and encourage us that we serve a God who is able to redeem and restore all things, and who comes alongside us and comforts us in all situations. Once the child is conceived and born, we come to the blessings upon Naomi, the child, and Ruth. Read with me in verses 14 to 15. The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." The women that are mentioned here are the local friends and townswomen of Naomi and Ruth. Our attention here is now drawn to Naomi. The birth of a son means that her deceased husband Elimelech's family name will continue, and also means that she will continue to be looked after in her old age. While we've been focusing a lot of attention on Ruth and Boaz, we need to remember that all these events were put into play because of the good decision that Naomi made to return to Bethlehem in the first place. The choices that she'd made a decade ago resulted in incredible heartache and loss, so much so that she wanted to change her name from Pleasant to Bitter, as a constant daily reminder of how horrible things had become. Yet now we see how God can change things around. It could be easy to judge Naomi for her lack of faith. Yet how often do we ourselves lose sight and, like Peter, take our eyes off Jesus and become overwhelmed by the wind and waves? For me, Naomi is a reminder that God's plan is perfect and filled with love. And even when we can't figure out what he is doing, and it all seems so desperate, he still knows what he is doing. We should learn that all things work together for the good of those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. In verse 15, the women of Naomi's community remind us too of the blessing and responsibility of family and community, and how we need to be there for each other. Our time during lockdown has reminded us that it's not good to be alone, that by reaching out to others, we can help renew each other's lives and sustain each other. This is known as the Rosetto effect, where communities learn to nourish each other, and is named after the town of Rosetto in America. Have a look at this short clip which explains a bit more. However, before you do so, let me remind you that I'm not suggesting that we all start smoking cigars, but I do feel challenged to build the kind of community that the friends of Naomi envisage. Have a look at the clip and see for yourself.
In the 1960s, a US town called Rosetto was an anomaly in America. No one under 55 had died of a heart attack or showed any signs of heart disease. The local death rate for men over 65 was half the national average. A team of researchers led by Dr. Stuart Wolfe considered whether this was because of their diet, location, family history or exercise habits, but on the surface, nothing was different from the rest of America. In fact, the town was made up of Italian immigrants who worked in quarries and factories, smoked unfiltered cigars, and had dinner tables laden with rich Italian food. Rosettans of the 1960s still held on to their old world ways. It was normal to find 3 generations under the same roof. 80% of men in the town were members of at least one community group. They would gather in each other's kitchens, play cards and simply talk. The conclusion? Rosettans were nourished by each other. Over the next decade, the multi-generational homes broke up, and by 1971, when opulent houses, expensive cars and swimming pools appeared, the first person under the age of 55 died of a heart attack. By the 1980s, the rate of fatal heart attacks in Rosetto was the same as the rest of the country.
Many people don't have an extended family that they see regularly. They don't have 2 or 3 generations of people who live in a neighborhood together. They don't have a church or synagogue they go to regularly. They don't have a job that they've been at for many years. And we all know that these things affect the quality of our lives, but they actually affect our survival, and to a much larger degree than we had once realized. And so what we've learned is that it's not enough to focus on the behavior. It's not enough just to give people information. We have to work at this deeper level. You know, the number one most commonly prescribed prescription drugs in the US and probably most of the world have been antidepressants for the last 10 years because there are a lot of depressed people out there. Now, a skeptic might say, oh, come on, give me a break. You mean sitting around talking about my feelings, is somehow going to help me live longer if I've got cancer? Please. It's so easy to make fun of these ideas. Oh, these are, we're just so touchy-feely, but we are touchy-feely creatures. We are creatures of community. That's how we've survived as a species, is by learning how to care and love and nurture each other. And we ignore those ideas at our own peril.
Finally, in verse 16 to 17, we come to the naming of the child. Read with me. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. The epilogue finishes here with the naming of the child, and in these few short sentences, we can see the bigger picture into which the story of Ruth fits. The son of Ruth and Boaz was named Obed. He had a son named Jesse. He had a son named David. And David had a descendant, you guessed it, named Jesus. Naomi's return to Bethlehem and the roots of David in Bethlehem, going back to Ruth and Boaz, are why Joseph and Mary had to go to Bethlehem to register in the census of Augustus, which you can read about in Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 5. Ruth and Boaz are the reason why Jesus was born in Bethlehem. So the epilogue reminds us that God's heart for redemption, seen so clearly in the lives of Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz, are part of a far bigger plan to redeem the whole world, a plan which includes both you and me. Join me for the final episode as we draw our study to a close.